Hello, welcome to Know About History channel. Hope you like it.
The transformation of industrial landscapes into skeletal remains of concrete and steel during the middle of the 20th century birthed a new and terrifying evolution in infantry doctrine, one where the rubble itself became a primary weapon in the hands of the marksman. In the annals of military history, few environments have ever been as conducive to the art of the sniper as the ruined cities of the Eastern Front, most notably Stalingrad. This city, once a shining symbol of Soviet industrialization, was reduced by relentless Luftwaffe bombardment and heavy artillery into a jagged, subterranean, and multi-layered labyrinth that neutralized the traditional advantages of the German blitzkrieg. The German Wehrmacht, built for high-speed maneuver, found itself ensnared in what they called Rattenkrieg, or Rat War, a conflict of basements, sewers, and shattered apartments where the front line was often measured in inches rather than miles. In this environment, the sniper emerged not merely as a specialist, but as a dominant psychological and tactical force capable of paralyzing entire companies and dictating the tempo of the battle through the sheer threat of sudden, invisible death. The fundamental shift occurred when the Soviet High Command, recognizing the disparity in mechanized strength, turned to the individual hunter as a means of attrition. The ruins provided an infinite number of precision kill zones, locations where the geometry of the wreckage created narrow funnels of visibility, allowing a sniper to remain hidden in the deep shadows of a collapsed building while maintaining a clear line of sight over a vital intersection or a water source. The debris was not just an obstacle, it was the ultimate camouflage. Bricks, twisted rebar, and charred timber offered thousands of loopholes and firing positions that were nearly impossible for an advancing enemy to systematically clear. A sniper could fire from deep within a room, several feet back from a window, ensuring that the muzzle flash was contained and the sound of the shot was muffled by the surrounding masonry. This mastery of urban geometry allowed Soviet snipers to turn every street corner into a lethal gamble for the German invaders. The most famous of these urban hunters was Vasily Zaitsev, a man whose background as a hunter in the Ural Mountains provided him with the patience and observational skills necessary to thrive in the ruins. Zaitsev's arrival at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the psychological war. He did not just kill. He hunted with a methodology that combined ballistic science with a profound understanding of human behavior. He understood that in a city of ruins, the most dangerous weapon was not the rifle but the eyes. He established a sniper school within the wreckage of the Matisse factory, training a group known as the Zaychata, or Leverets. These marksmen were taught to observe the city for hours, looking for the slightest deviation in the landscape, a scrap of cloth moving against the wind, a puff of cigarette smoke, or the glint of a lens. By decentralizing the sniper units and allowing them to operate in small teams of two, a shooter and an observer, the Soviets created a pervasive web of surveillance and lethality that covered the city's most critical sectors. Tactically, the snipers in the ruins utilized a technique known as snapping, where they would wait for a specific moment of noise, a mortar shell exploding or the roar of a tank engine, to mask the sound of their own shot. This made it impossible for the Germans to locate the origin of the fire through acoustic triangulation. Furthermore, the snipers often targeted officers, radio operators, and observers, effectively decapitating the German command structure at the tactical level. Without officers to lead them, German infantry squads often became paralyzed, unwilling to move across open spaces or even to peek over the edge of a trench. This psychological suppression was perhaps the sniper's greatest contribution to the defense of the city. The constant fear of the unseen shooter created a state of chronic stress that eroded the morale of the Sixth Army, turning the once confident conquerors of Europe into terrified men huddled in the mud. The weaponry used in these precision kill zones was as rugged as the men who carried them. The Soviet Mosin Nagant 1891 30ths, equipped with a 3.5x PU or a 4x PEM scope, was the primary tool of the trade. Despite its bolt-action design being decades old, its 7.62 by 54 mmR cartridge was powerful and reliable over the typical engagement ranges of an urban battlefield, which were often less than 300 meters. The Germans countered with the Karabiner 98K, often fitted with a ZF-39 or ZF-42 scope. While the German optics were generally superior in terms of clarity and light transmission, the Soviet snipers benefited from a more decentralized and aggressive doctrine. German snipers were initially used as support elements for infantry, whereas the Soviet Snajipar were often given independent missions to clear specific zones or to provide overwatch for large-scale counterattacks. The architecture of the ruins dictated the tactics. In the massive industrial complexes like the Barakati Ordnance Factory or the Red October Steelworks, snipers utilized the overhead cranes and catwalks to gain verticality. By firing from high vantage points down into the German positions, they bypassed the protection of traditional foxholes and sandbags. Conversely, they also used the sewer systems and cellars to move undetected behind German lines, popping up in the rear of an advance to create chaos before disappearing back into the earth. This 360-degree battlefield meant that there was no safe zone. Death could come from above, from below, or through a hole in a wall that hadn't been there the day before. The ruins were constantly shifting as artillery fire leveled one building and created a new pile of rubble elsewhere, forcing the snipers and their prey to constantly adapt their mental maps of the city. One of the most intense aspects of this conflict was the counter-sniper duel. When a German unit was pinned down by a particularly effective Soviet marksman, they would often call for their own sniper specialists to engage in a deadly game of cat and mouse. These duels could last for days, with both participants remaining motionless for hours, waiting for the other to make a single mistake. They used decoys, helmets placed on sticks, or dummies dressed in uniforms, to draw fire and reveal the enemy's position. The famous, though some historians argue mythologized, duel between Zaitsev and a German master sniper, often identified as Major Koenig or Heinz Thorwald, epitomizes the high-stakes nature of these encounters. Whether the specific duel occurred exactly as propaganda described is less important than the reality it represented. The ruins of Stalingrad had become a laboratory for the most refined and lethal forms of individual combat. The female snipers of the Soviet Union also played a significant role, most famously Lyudmila Pavlichenko, though her greatest exploits were in the ruins of Sevastopol and Odessa. Her presence, and that of hundreds of other women, demonstrated that the urban sniper role was one that prioritized technical skill, patience, and mental fortitude over raw physical strength. These women were often celebrated as Lady Death, and their success in the ruins provided a massive boost to Soviet domestic morale while simultaneously striking terror into the hearts of German soldiers who found it hard to reconcile their ideological views of women with the reality of being hunted by them. As the battle for the ruins progressed, the snipers began to integrate more closely with other arms of the military. They became the eyes for the artillery, calling in strikes on hidden German concentrations that only they could see from their precarious perches. They worked with storm groups, small, heavily armed units equipped with submachine guns and flamethrowers, by providing covering fire as the groups cleared rooms and floors. The sniper would hold the street or the courtyard, preventing any German reinforcements from entering the building while the storm group worked inside. This synergy of long-range precision and short-range violence was the precursor to modern urban combat tactics. The psychological landscape of the ruins was one of extreme sensory deprivation and sudden sensory overload. A sniper might spend 14 hours in a crawlspace, smelling the rot of unburied bodies and the acrid scent of cold smoke, only to have the silence shattered by the crack of a rifle and the sight of a target collapsing. This required a specific type of soldier, one capable of extreme detachment and focused aggression. The snipers who survived the ruins were often those who could treat the city as a mathematical problem of angles, windage, and light, rather than a place of human suffering. They learned to read the language of the ruins, the way dust settled, the behavior of birds, and the subtle changes in the shadows as the sun moved across the sky. The impact of the sniper in the ruins extended far beyond the number of casualties they inflicted. They forced the German army to expend enormous amounts of ammunition and resources on suppressive fire, blindly blasting buildings with tanks and flak guns in the hopes of killing a single man who might not even be there. They delayed the German advance for months, buying the Soviet High Command the time needed to organize Operation Uranus, the massive pincer movement that would eventually encircle and destroy the Sixth Army. Every German soldier who fell to a sniper's bullet was a testament to the failure of the blitzkrieg in the face of urban ruin. The city of Stalin did not fall because the ruins themselves refused to surrender, held by men and women who had turned the very bones of the city into a precision kill zone. The legacy of these urban hunters remains embedded in modern military doctrine. The lessons learned in the rubble of Stalingrad, Berlin, and Warsaw influenced how snipers were trained and deployed during the Cold War and into the 21st century. The concept of urban stalking, the use of loophole firing, and the importance of counter-sniper operations are all direct descendants of the tactics developed in the ruins. Today, as urban warfare becomes increasingly common, the image of the lone marksman in the window of a shattered apartment remains the most potent symbol of the lethal complexity of the modern battlefield. The snipers of 1942 and 1943 proved that even in an age of mass production and mechanized slaughter, the individual, equipped with a simple rifle and a mastery of their environment, remains the most dangerous element of war. As the conflict deepened into the winter of 1942, the environmental conditions in the ruins became even more extreme. The sub-zero temperatures meant that snipers had to manage not only the enemy but also the physical limitations of their own bodies. Fingers would freeze to the metal of the trigger guard, and the breath of the sniper could create a telltale plume of steam that would give away a position. To counter this, snipers learned to breathe through silk scarves or to time their breaths with the wind. They used oils that wouldn't freeze in the bolt mechanisms and developed methods for heating their positions using small, smokeless spirit lamps. The struggle for survival in the ruins was as much a battle against nature as it was against the German army. The German response to the sniper threat became increasingly desperate. They began to deploy Sturmpionier units, combat engineers specialized in demolition, to simply level any building suspected of harboring a sniper. This, however, often backfired, as the resulting piles of rubble only created more complex and unpredictable firing positions for the Soviet marksmen. The Germans also tried to implement their own Scharfschützen schools, drawing on their rich tradition of hunting and forestry, but they were often playing catch-up in an environment that the Soviets had already mastered. The German snipers were frequently hampered by the rigid hierarchical structure of their army, which didn't always allow for the independent initiative required for effective urban sniping. In the final stages of the battle for Stalingrad, as the German pocket narrowed, the snipers played a crucial role in the final liquidation of the Sixth Army. They picked off the last remaining officers and specialists, accelerating the collapse of order within the encircled force. When Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus finally surrendered, it was in a city that had been thoroughly cleansed of its former life, leaving only the ruins and the ghosts of the hunters who had defended them. The victory was a collective one, but the snipers were the vanguard of the resistance, the invisible wall that the German machine could not break. Beyond Stalingrad, the role of the sniper in urban ruins continued to evolve. In the uprising of Warsaw, Polish Home Army snipers used the city's complex basement and sewer networks to harass German units, despite being drastically outgunned. In the fall of Berlin, Soviet snipers once again utilized the verticality of the ruins, this time firing from the upper floors of government buildings and apartment blocks into the retreating German remnants. Each city presented its own unique challenges, but the core principles remained the same: observation, patience, and the exploitation of the ruins to create a precision kill zone. The sniper became the ultimate force multiplier, a single soldier who could achieve strategic effects out of all proportion to their numbers. The technical proficiency of these snipers was matched by their ability to camouflage themselves in the most unlikely of places. Some snipers were known to hide inside the carcasses of dead horses, or to build elaborate nests within the chimneys of burned-out houses. They would use spider holes, small, covered pits in the middle of a rubble field, where they could sit for days with only a tiny aperture for their scope. This level of commitment to the hunt was what made them so terrifying. For the average infantryman, the knowledge that an enemy might be just 20 yards away, hidden in a pile of bricks, was a source of constant, grinding anxiety. The documentation of these sniper activities was also a key part of the Soviet war effort. War correspondents like Vasily Grossman and Ilya Ehrenberg wrote extensively about the exploits of Zaitsev and others, turning them into proletarian heroes. These accounts emphasized the scientific nature of their work, portraying the sniper as a disciplined technician of death. This propaganda served a dual purpose. It motivated the Soviet soldiers to see the ruins as a place where they could win, and it signaled to the Germans that they were being watched and hunted by a superior breed of warrior. The myth of the sniper became almost as powerful as the reality, contributing to the invisible front that the Germans could never fully secure. In the decades following the war, the analysis of urban sniper tactics became a cornerstone of military intelligence. Analysts looked at the hit-to-kill ratios and the specific types of wounds inflicted to understand the efficiency of the marksman. They found that in the ruins, a single sniper could often achieve more than a whole company of regular infantry in terms of psychological impact and strategic delay. This realization led to the integration of specialized sniper training into almost every modern army. The sniper was no longer an auxiliary but a core component of the infantry squad, reflecting the lessons of the ruins. The transformation of Stalingrad's ruins into a precision kill zone was not just a matter of geography, but of the human will to adapt. The soldiers who fought there were pushed to the very limits of human endurance, and the snipers represented the peak of that endurance. They were the ones who could remain calm in the midst of total destruction, who could find order in the chaos of a collapsed city, and who could turn the debris of a civilization into the tools of its defense. Their story is a reminder of the terrifying ingenuity of mankind when faced with extinction, and the enduring power of the individual in the face of the industrial machine. The urban environment of the 1940s, characterized by thick masonry and dense street plans, offered a specific type of protection and visibility that modern glass and steel cities do not. The ruins of that era were heavy, opaque, and structural, allowing for the creation of nests that could survive nearby artillery blasts. A sniper in a 1940s ruin was encased in layers of brick and mortar that provided excellent ballistic protection against return fire. This physical security allowed the sniper to stay in a single location for longer periods than is often possible in modern urban combat, where thermals and high-tech sensors can often see through walls. The snipers of the ruins were the masters of a low-tech, high-stakes game that relied on the fundamental limits of the human eye. The silence of the sniper was their most effective weapon. In a world of screaming shells and clanking tank treads, the single, quiet crack of a high-powered rifle was the most chilling sound of all. It was a sound that meant someone had been specifically chosen to die. Unlike the indiscriminate death of a bombing raid, the sniper's bullet was personal. It was a message to the survivors that they were being observed, that their movements were known, and that their lives were at the mercy of a stranger hiding in the shadows. This personal nature of the violence was what made the sniper such a potent symbol of the rat war. The training of the Zaychata by Zaitsev emphasized the importance of the first shot. In the ruins, there were rarely second chances. If a sniper missed, the muzzle flash or the disturbance of dust would almost certainly draw immediate and overwhelming return fire from machine guns or mortars. Therefore, the sniper had to be a master of ballistic calculation, accounting for the strange wind currents that swirled between buildings and the way light reflected off the dusty air. They had to understand the angle of depression when firing from high floors, a factor that often caused inexperienced shooters to fire over the heads of their targets. Furthermore, the snipers in the ruins became experts in battlefield recovery. They would often use the weapons and equipment of their victims, scavenging better optics or more reliable ammunition. This was a war of scarcity, where a single working scope was worth more than a dozen rifles. The snipers were the ultimate scavengers, moving through the ruins like predators through a forest, always looking for an advantage. Their ability to survive and thrive in an environment of total lack was a testament to their resourcefulness and their intimate connection to the terrain. The tactical use of the killing ground, a pre-selected area where the sniper had clear fields of fire and multiple escape routes, was another innovation of the urban marksman. A sniper would not just find a hole and sit in it, they would engineer the environment. They might move a piece of sheet metal to block an enemy's view, or clear a small path through the rubble to allow for a silent retreat. They would mark ranges to specific landmarks, a burned-out bus, a specific doorway, a pile of girders, so that they didn't have to estimate distance under pressure. This preparation turned the ruins from a random pile of debris into a sophisticated weapon system. As we look back at the history of the sniper in the ruins, we see a narrative of individual mastery within the context of total war. The ruins were the stage, but the snipers were the actors who gave the battle its most visceral and terrifying character. They proved that no matter how much technology is brought to the battlefield, the fundamental elements of war, vision, stealth, and precision, remain unchanged. The ruined city was not just a graveyard for the old world, it was the birthplace of a new kind of soldier, one who could turn the very remains of a city into a precision kill zone that would change the course of history. The structural decay of the cities also allowed for depth of field deceptions. A sniper might position themselves behind 2 or 3 successive holes in different walls, creating a tunnel of visibility that was invisible from any other angle. To an observer on the street, there was no window, no opening, just a solid-looking wall. But from the sniper's perspective, these aligned holes created a perfect, protected firing port. This level of environmental manipulation required an architect's eye and a hunter's instinct. It allowed snipers to operate in sectors that the Germans believed were completely closed, providing the Soviets with a continuous source of intelligence and opportunistic kills. The role of the spotter in these environments was equally critical, though often overshadowed by the shooter. The spotter was the one who managed the big picture, using high-powered binoculars to scan the horizon while the sniper focused on a specific target through the narrow field of a scope. The spotter handled the range-finding, the windage corrections, and, most importantly, the security of the position. In the ruins, where an enemy could approach from any direction, the spotter's role as a rearguard was the difference between life and death. The bond between a sniper and their spotter was one of absolute trust, forged in the silence of the ruins and the heat of the kill. The impact of the sniper in the ruins also forced a change in infantry equipment. The Germans began to issue more armored plates for their observers and developed periscope rifles, the Winkelzielgerät, that allowed a soldier to fire from behind cover without exposing their head. However, these gadgets were often cumbersome and lacked the flexibility of a human marksman. The fundamental problem remained: the ruins were too vast and too complex to be neutralized by technology alone. The only real answer to a sniper in the ruins was another sniper, leading to the legendary duels that defined the conflict. The environmental psychology of the ruins also played into the predatory mindset of the sniper. In a normal landscape, there are clear boundaries: woods, fields, roads. In a ruined city, these boundaries are blurred. A bedroom becomes a trench, a staircase becomes a mountain pass, a basement becomes a bunker. The sniper who could best map this alt-geography was the one who would survive. They learned to think in 3 dimensions, always looking for the third way, across a street, or the 4th floor escape route. This cognitive flexibility was the hallmark of the successful urban hunter. When the history of the Eastern Front is written, the snipers who turned the ruins into precision kill zones stand out as the most iconic figures of the urban struggle. They were the ones who gave the Rat War its name and its teeth. They were the ones who turned the Sixth Army's pride into dust, one bullet at a time. The ruins of Stalingrad, Berlin, and countless other cities were the crucible in which the modern art of sniping was forged, a lethal combination of ancient hunting skills and modern industrial warfare. The legacy of those marksmen continues to haunt the ruins of every modern conflict, a silent reminder that in the broken heart of a city, the hunter is king. The strategic significance of these snipers was also reflected in how they were integrated into the broader, defense-in-depth strategies of the Soviet 62nd Army. General Vasily Chuikov, the commander of the 62nd Army in Stalingrad, explicitly encouraged the sniper movement as a way to keep the Germans on edge 24 hours a day. He recognized that snipers were an incredibly cost-effective way to inflict casualties. For the price of a few dozen 7.62mm rounds, a single sniper could neutralize a German platoon's offensive capability for an entire day. This economy of force was vital for a Soviet army that was often struggling with logistical bottlenecks across the Volga. The evolution of the sniper's nest within the ruins also saw the use of sound-dampening materials like old carpets, mattresses, and heavy drapes found in the wreckage. These materials not only helped muffle the sound of the shot but also prevented the percussion of the rifle from kicking up dust that would reveal the sniper's location. This meticulous attention to signature management was the difference between a successful mission and a quick death. The snipers were essentially early practitioners of stealth technology, using the available materials of the ruins to minimize their acoustic and visual footprint. The ethical and moral dimension of the snipers' work in the ruins was also a subject of much internal reflection and external propaganda. While the snipers were celebrated as heroes, their work was inherently cold and calculating. They watched men perform mundane tasks, eating, writing letters, talking to comrades, before ending their lives. This required a level of psychological hardening that was unique even among frontline soldiers. The ruins, with their pervasive sense of death and desolation, provided a fitting backdrop for this grim work. The snipers became the personification of the city's own vengeance, a relentless and unforgiving force that emerged from the rubble to strike down the invaders. The final triumph of the Soviet snipers was not just in the liberation of their cities, but in the total destruction of the German military's belief in its own invincibility. The blitzkrieg had been stopped cold in the ruins, and the sniper was the primary instrument of that stoppage. The precision kill zones, created in the wreckage of Stalingrad, were the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. The hunters of the ruins had turned the tables on the hunters of nations, proving that the smallest gap in a wall could be the doorway to a final victory. Their legacy is one of extreme skill, iron nerves, and the profound ability to find opportunity in the midst of total ruin. In the final assessment, the art of the sniper in the urban ruins represents a peak of infantry combat. It is a form of warfare that strips away the veneer of modern technology and leaves only the core elements: the weapon, the eye, and the terrain. The ruins of the 1940s provided the perfect terrain, the Mosin Nagant and K-98 provided the weapons, and the desperate conditions of the Eastern Front provided the eyes. Together, they created a chapter of military history that remains as compelling as it is terrifying. A story of how the broken bones of a city were turned into a precision instrument of death. As the ruins were eventually cleared and the cities rebuilt, the physical evidence of the kill zones vanished, but the tactical memory remained. The sniper's view of the world, one of sectors, ranges, and vulnerabilities, became part of the collective knowledge of modern militaries. The ruins of the past taught the soldiers of the future that no city is truly conquered as long as a single marksman remains in the shadows, waiting for the perfect shot. The precision kill zone is not just a place on a map. It is a state of mind, a lethal realization that in the chaos of ruins, the one who sees first, wins. The enduring image of the Stalingrad sniper, perched in the skeletal remains of a factory, looking through a cracked scope at a distant target, remains the definitive portrait of urban warfare. It captures the isolation, the focus, and the sudden, sharp violence that defines the struggle for the city. It is a portrait of a soldier who has become part of the architecture of death, a man who has turned the ruins into a precision kill zone and, in doing so, has become a legend of the Great Patriotic War. The story of these snipers is the story of how the weak can defeat the strong through patience and precision, and how the ruins of today can become the fortress of tomorrow. The density of the rubble also created unique acoustic environments where sound would bounce off jagged surfaces, creating phantom shots that confused the enemy. A sniper could use this to their advantage, firing from a position where the echo would make it seem as though the shot came from the opposite direction. This acoustic camouflage was another layer of the deception that made the sniper so difficult to pin down. In the ruins, the ears were as easily deceived as the eyes, and the sniper was the master of both. The historical record of these snipers, preserved in memoirs and military archives, continues to provide a wealth of information for those who study the small wars within the great ones. From the selection of the optimal loophole to the psychological preparation for the long wait, the experiences of the Stalingrad snipers remain the gold standard for urban marksmen. They proved that in the end, it is not the size of the army or the power of the bombs that determines the fate of a city, but the skill and determination of the individuals who refuse to let it fall. The ruins were their kingdom, and the precision kill zone was their throne. Finally, we must consider the long-term impact on the soldiers themselves. Those who survived the ruins as snipers were often forever changed by the experience. The intense focus and the constant state of the hunt left deep psychological scars. Yet, their contribution to the war was undeniable. They were the ones who held the line when all seemed lost, who turned the wreckage of their lives into a weapon for their country's survival. The snipers of the ruins were the ultimate urban survivors, the ones who proved that even in the heart of a shattered city, there is a place for the precision and the power of the human spirit. Their legacy is the story of how the ruins were turned into a precision kill zone, and how that kill zone changed the world. The tactical evolution did not stop at the edge of the city. As the Red Army moved westward, the lessons of Stalingrad were applied to other urban centers like Budapest, Breslau, and finally Berlin. In each of these locations, the sniper group became a standard part of the Soviet assault architecture. They were the ones who ensured that the death zones between buildings were covered, allowing the infantry to advance with some measure of security. The ruins were different in each city, but the method was the same: occupy the high ground, cover the intersections, and wait for the enemy to show themselves. This consistent application of sniper doctrine was a major factor in the speed and efficiency of the final Soviet offensives. The German snipers, too, became more effective as they were forced into defensive roles within their own crumbling cities. In the ruins of the Reich, they fought with a desperation that mirrored the Soviets' earlier stand. The wolves, as some German sniper units were called, utilized the same techniques of masking and deception. However, by 1945, the sheer weight of Soviet numbers and the overwhelming presence of Allied air power made their task impossible. The ruins of Berlin became a kill zone for the German snipers as much as for their enemies, as the city was systematically leveled by artillery. The age of the sniper in the ruins reached its bloody conclusion in the heart of the Nazi capital, leaving behind a legacy of destruction and lethal precision. In the end, the history of the snipers who turned ruins into precision kill zones is a testament to the brutal efficiency of urban combat. It is a story of how the environment and the individual can combine to create a force that is greater than the sum of its parts. The ruins of the mid-20th century were the perfect incubator for this kind of warfare, a time when the city itself became a participant in the slaughter. The marksmen who navigated that world were the ultimate practitioners of a dark and difficult art, one that remains at the core of military strategy to this day. The ruins are gone, but the ghost of the sniper remains, a silent watcher in the shattered windows of history. As military technology continues to advance, with the introduction of drones, thermal imaging, and artificial intelligence, the role of the sniper in the ruins is being reimagined once again. Yet, the basic requirements of the urban marksman, stealth, patience, and the ability to read the terrain, remain as vital as ever. The ruins of the future will likely be different, filled with the debris of a digital world, but the hunter who can turn that debris into a precision kill zone will still hold the power of life and death. The lessons of Stalingrad and the other great ruin battles of history are not just historical curiosities, they are foundational truths about the nature of conflict in the human landscape. The sniper in the ruins is a figure of the past, but the precision kill zone is a reality of the future. The transformation of the urban landscape into a weaponized terrain also required a deep understanding of structural engineering. Snipers had to know which walls were likely to collapse under fire and which floors could support their weight. They became unintentional experts in the pathology of buildings, knowing that a certain type of steel beam would provide better cover than a concrete pillar. This technical knowledge allowed them to push the limits of where a human could reasonably be expected to hide. They weren't just soldiers. They were ruin dwellers, a new breed of combatant that was perfectly adapted to the broken world they inhabited. The impact on civilian populations caught in these ruins was also catastrophic. The sniper's presence meant that any movement, even for water or food, was a life-threatening act. The city became a prison where the walls themselves were the guards. This adds a layer of tragedy to the legend of the sniper, as their precision kill zones often claimed the innocent alongside the combatant. The ruins were a place of total war, where the distinction between the front line and the home front had completely dissolved. The sniper was the enforcer of this total war, the one who ensured that there was no sanctuary within the city's heart. As the years pass, the story of the snipers in the ruins continues to be retold in film, literature, and gaming, often romanticizing the figure of the lone marksman. However, the reality was far more grueling and less poetic. It was a life of filth, hunger, and extreme boredom interrupted by moments of intense, heart-pounding terror. The precision of the kill zone was a result of endless hours of tedious observation and the constant threat of a horrific death. The true history of these snipers is not one of glory, but of a grim, professional commitment to a lethal task in the most inhospitable environment imaginable. They turned ruins into precision kill zones not because they wanted to, but because it was the only way to survive and win in the rat war. The legacy of these marksmen is a somber reminder of the ingenuity and the brutality of human conflict. The ruins they inhabited are now mostly gone, replaced by the glass and steel of modern cities, but the principles of their combat remain etched in the manuals of every army on Earth. The sniper in the ruins remains the ultimate symbol of the individual's power to shape the course of history, one shot at a time, from the shadows of a broken world. The precision kill zone was their masterpiece, a dark and lethal creation that helped save a nation and destroy an empire. The ruins have their secrets, and the snipers were the ones who knew them best. Their story is a permanent part of the landscape of modern war, a silent, deadly echo from the heart of the ruins.